Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Sheila. Welcome to this talk titled Time is Money, Communication is Wealth. We all know about time is money. We use it, we practice it. But the thing this talk is about is communication is wealth, and I'm going to go specifically into the public speaking. But let me just kind of give you my thoughts on this before I do that. Communicating well gives you influence, gives you power, gives you respectability, gives you gravitas. And when you have that, it leads to wealth, financial, social, political, reputation-wise, you name it. Communication well allows good things to happen. And I believe that this is one of the last skill that we are going to still hold. All of these other things are going to eventually be taken over by machines, I believe, machines. Machines can already see. Vision is done. Vision, machines can see. We have driverless car. For that to happen, cars can see. Machines can do a lot of heavy duty work in automation. A lot of our factories are getting automated. Machines can take over. The one thing the machines are not good at, and that's one of the reasons why Amazon employs so many people, is this: our ability to grab things, dexterity. Once machines can figure out can distinguish between, can lift a barbell and an egg, can lift a barbell and then lift an egg and not smash the egg and not break it, game's over. As far as low wages are concerned, low wage jobs are concerned. As soon as machines can figure out how to grab a barbell and then grab an egg without breaking it, game's over. All the low wage jobs are probably going to start disappearing very fast once machines can figure that out. They can grab things. Some of the things we can do our fingers, robots can't do. They will figure this out. Robots will get it. Robots will figure it out. And with vision, but the one thing the robots are not going to be able to do is what we do well. So what's making us less human, right? With the technology, it's making us less human. Unfortunately, our antidote to technological advancement is to become more human. Think about that. The antidote to deal with automation, robots taking over, is to become more human. And there's no better way to become more human than the ability to communicate, specifically ability to speak, ability to give speeches, to talk, one-on-one, one to few, one to many. That is something the robots are going to have a real hard time doing. Because we've been doing this for such a long time that robots are going to have difficulty. I do believe that robots or machines in general, I interchangeably will be using that, will be able to write. Maybe not like Shakespeare, but they will be able to write where we're not going to be able to distinguish between something written by machine and something written by human. But we will be able to tell when it comes to verbal communication between a human being that is good and a robot. Robot is going to sound robotic, and we don't connect when somebody sounds robotic. So the only key advantage that I believe we will have, not to scare you, but when you see the trends on what's happening, the only advantage that we will have is this. So you have come to the right talk. It's not futuristic. This is already happening. You just look around and see the communication is it. It's the only game left in town, which we're going to have to get good at and master it. Not only develop it, but master it. That's our only advantage with this robotic onslaught, with the technological advancement. This is the one area where we're going to have to really up our game. Okay. And the good news here is this is a skill anybody can learn. You don't need to go to Ivy League schools. You don't need to go to get a fancy certificate. You don't even need any kind of coaching either. You don't need to hire an expensive coach like me. You can do it on your own. It's not that difficult. It's not difficult. That's what I'm going to tell you. This is stuff that is that anybody can do, and we have to do it. Okay, so that's what this talk is about. The one thing before I move on is this. So I guide people thrive on high stakes stage. So what does that even mean? High stakes is simple: win or lose. When it's high stakes, you're either going to win or lose. That's it. And I help people when it comes to, I primarily work with executives, people who are going for executive level jobs, 1 or 2 levels below the CEO. And there, they have to really have that executive presence. They can't come across looking like worker bees. They have to sound like they belong in the C-suite. So I work with them so that they sound like they belong in the C-suite, that they already are in the C-suite. And communication is the only way to do it. Communication is the only way that they can do it. There's no formula. They're not writing a code or anything. They have to act, think, and sound like executives. That's how they get those jobs. But also people who are going for sales presentation. I work with them and coach them. And the third, I work with people who have to give speech in front of, few or many, where it's high stakes, where either good things can happen or bad things can happen. And here's the thing, every time you get in front of people, there are 4 things that are possible. Either it's high stakes, you're going to either win or lose, like a job interview, or it could be high opportunity, like this one. This is not high stakes, it's high opportunity. Because in the audience, you never know who's going to be in the audience, who they know. That makes this a high opportunity. Or it could be high risk. Like Martin Luther King gave his speech at the front of the Lincoln Memorial. That was a high risk speech. A lot of bad things could have happened. There were a lot of bad things people were anticipating happening. It didn't. That was a high risk speech. Then there's a high waste of time. And most speeches are that, high waste of time. Hopefully this won't be one of them. Okay. Hopefully this won't be one of them. So let's now get to, so the heart of this talk, essentially in a nutshell, is why. Why is it important to become an effective speaker? What is it that makes one an effective speaker? What is it? And how do you do it? Simple. This is a very simple talk. It's simple. I'm answering 3 questions here. Why, what, and how. Okay, so let's get to the why. So why become an effective speaker? I kind of addressed it, but in a nutshell, let's get it down a little layer. It's the economy, stupid. That's that famous quote by James Carville. It is the economy, stupid. You just look at the economy, the way we are progressing. We've progressed from agricultural economy to industrial to knowledge. And now I think we can pretty much say with all this Google and Google advertisement, Facebook and all kinds of, we're living in an attention economy. There's just so much noise out there. Whoever captures an attention wins in everything, whether it's in business, politics, you name it. So entertainment, it's all about attention. Who can grab your attention and who can keep your attention? Peter Drucker used to say the economy used to be about getting customers and keeping customers, marketing and innovation. I think today it's about grabbing attention and keeping attention. Grab somebody's attention and keep it. It's moving fast, and that's happening very fast. And attention means that there are certain things that we can do. So attention is from the economic, but individually we have to do it too. Grab people's attention and capture their attention and then keep it. So in this talk, I have to not only grab your attention, but I have a challenge of keeping it while I'm talking. That's what we have to do, whether you're talking one-on-one, one to few, or one to many. That's what it's all about. But the most effective way to get people's undivided attention is still this, by any means. Just think about it. When you go and give people time, they say people's attention, there's a stack of things I keep hearing. People's attention is 8 seconds. Yes, but when it's a public speaking, and if somebody is really speaking and is able to, that 8 seconds, you buy more 8 seconds. You keep buying more and more 8 seconds, and it builds up. So the burden is on the speaker. Grab the attention and keep it. That's my job. Grab the attention and keep it. That's your job. When you're talking to somebody one-on-one, one to few, and one to many. There is no better way to do this than speaking. Now, one thing I want to make it clear is, I'm going to use the word interchangeably here, so I don't want people to get confused. We use the word public speaking, but let's face it, today everything is public. You know, if somebody records you and puts it on YouTube, it's public, even though you thought it was a private. So there's no such thing as public versus private speaking. If somebody records you, it's public, essentially, right? Remember what happened to Mitt Romney? He was giving a talk and somebody recorded, and suddenly it became public. And he never recovered. So there is no such thing as public speaking. Then the thing that Donald Trump did, that was private, but was it? It became public. There's no private speaking anymore. So everything is public. So that means there are only two kinds of speaking. Remember what happened to Mitt Romney when he gave a talk and somebody recorded it and they made it public? Suddenly that talk was supposed to be private for the people, fundraisers, and it became public, and it hurt him. And the same thing happened to Donald Trump. He had his private talk with one of the hosts of a TV show, and that went public. Suddenly he had a major, suddenly that may have done a lot of, that triggered a lot of things that we'll see what happens. That triggered a lot of things, we'll see what happens if there is any consequences. That really almost derailed his campaign. Suddenly that went public. So the question is, there's only two kinds of speaking then, good and bad. That's it, good and bad. So we have to be good speakers because there's no such thing as private speaking anymore. Okay, so let's look at this more closely. So I just want to kind of give you a little history before I continue of communication. And this is a little history that I think it's important to see how communication has evolved. And communication has evolved primarily through our leaders, political leaders. When the country was founded, our founding fathers were great writers. I mean, we live by that today. The Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. Great writers. Adams, Jefferson, Madison, John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, you name it. Great writers. So great that our whole foundation of our country, the democracy, is built on what they wrote. That's how great they were. That was the dominant mode of communication, writing. Move fast forward, we get railroads. And suddenly there appears this amazing speaker. His name was Abraham Lincoln. He was so good. He got so much attention. These are the people who got attention. Writing. Then came railroads. And suddenly writing was still important, but not in that way. Writing was still important, but another mode of communication became important. Public speaking. And nobody did it better than Abraham Lincoln. He was amazing. So amazing that he got attention. And because he got attention, he decided to run for the presidency. And even though, because of his skill, he was able to run for the presidency. And he came up with an idea that, hey, he said, since people really think this guy has amazing ideas about keeping the Union together and about slavery, how to navigate between slavery and keeping the Union together. Nobody explained it as well as Abraham Lincoln. And because of that, he got a lot of attention. And that attention made him decide that he should run for presidency. Though he was never anybody's first choice, but he was everybody's second choice. When people's first choice started dropping out, he became first choice. And he got nominated and he got elected. and the rest is history. The thing that makes Abraham Lincoln so amazing is that he was very consistent. He spoke the same way, whether he was speaking one-on-one, one to few, one to many. He was an amazing storyteller. And there may not be any president who was as good a storyteller as Abraham Lincoln. Okay, we move fast forward. Another technology comes around, radio. And the president at that time who really took advantage of that was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And he went in front of American people and comforted them with some of the major problems that were happening, with recession, with war, all kinds of problems, recession, war, some of the major problems at that time. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt basically used the radio. And radio is a different kind of a being. He got into people's homes and they felt comforted. And that Franklin Delano Roosevelt was speaking directly to them. And he was very effective with radio. Fast forward, we get the television age. The president who pretty much was the gold standard was John F. Kennedy. Telegenic, articulate, humorous. He had it all. So suddenly, television became the mode of communication. So now you had to communicate. Now you didn't have to just watch what you were saying. Not what you had to sound like what you're saying. You had to look good when you were saying it. Wow, suddenly it got more complicated. Then came Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan brought stagecraft. When he's in Berlin Wall, he's not in some auditorium saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, I want you to tear down that wall over there." He was right in front of it saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down the wall." How effective is that when the wall is right behind you? Stagecraft, master at stagecraft. And now we have Donald Trump, who has taken it to the next level, where not only he writes books, even though he has ghost authors, but he writes books. He goes on radio. Goes on television. He does rallies. On top of it, he does tweeting. So he's doing everything to get his message out. And that's how complicated communication has become. Maybe in the future, you'll have some president who will be using holograms or something, some altered reality. They'll use some hologram technology, who knows? But there will be another president, maybe, a few years from now, maybe most likely next election, who'll be using holograms to communicate. So everybody will feel like he's in everybody's home, physically. That could be the next technology. I don't know. These technologies are constantly evolving. Communication is changing. So communication is broad, but we're going to focus specifically on the public speaking aspect of it. But I just wanted to kind of get that out, that the presidents essentially are setting this trend on how communicate, what's effective communication. The effective way was written, then it was speeches, then radio, then television, then stagecraft came up, and now it's social media. And Donald Trump basically has realized that it's to get attention, you got to keep tweeting. Whether it's even a bad tweeting is better. It's better to get your attention. Keep tweeting, no matter what. Even if it's bad news, tweet. Good news, tweet. Tweet. And he's been pretty successful at that. We'll see what happens in 2020, but I would say he's been very successful. He's been very successful at controlling the news. He's been extremely successful in controlling the news, on how people perceive news. He can drive the economy, stock market up or down. He can do just about anything with his communication. So communication now is so fast that he can affect the stock market that quickly. If he says that not going to negotiate the China deal, boom, the market just goes down by 100, 200 points, maybe more. Suddenly he says, yes, we're getting together. The market goes up 200 points. That's just the communication that he's performed. Now, you may not like it, but that's who he is. That's what he's realized, that you got to be getting attention. No attention, you don't exist. Okay, so the first person who really kind of did this part about attention was Lee Iacocca. And Lee Iacocca, if you remember, used to be on TV all the time, pitching the car. And he was so good at it. He's credited by essentially turning around Chrysler. Now he was the CEO, but what made him so unique was he didn't sit in the ivory tower strategizing. He got in front of the TV and did commercials. He did lots of commercials where he would be showing all the wonderful stuff that Chrysler was doing. And remember, Chrysler had taken out loans, was bailed out by the government because they were going to go bankrupt. They were bankrupt. So they were bailed out by the government. And Lee Iacocca basically was the face of Chrysler. And he wasn't just sitting in the ivory tower strategizing on what to do. He was just getting into American people's home on TV doing commercials. And his trademark phrase used to be, if you can find a better car, buy it. And people gave Chrysler a chance, a second look. And as a result, people started buying Chrysler, such that Chrysler essentially paid back the loan 7 years before they were expected. And Lee Iacocca was essentially getting the attention through television commercials. And he got attention. And what makes him so unique is that CEOs didn't do that in the past. He was like the first CEO who was out there all the time getting that message out. So Lee Iacocca, in my opinion, and this is from my perspective, because I kind of grew up in the 60s and 70s, kind of grew up in the 70s, and Lee Iacocca was the first CEO that I could remember used to be out there talking about. We never used to see who the CEOs were. I didn't know who the CEOs were, GM were. I don't know who the CEOs were. Lee Iacocca, everybody knew. He was the head of Chrysler. Then this guy, Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett is 89, but he's on TV all the time. He's on CNBC, he's on Fox Business, he's on TV. And he is the face of Berkshire Hathaway, and he's the third richest man in the world. But he knows that he has to get his message out on TV to the masses. He is Berkshire Hathaway. I don't know anybody else who works at, except his vice chairman, Charlie Munger. But besides that, I don't know who else works at Berkshire Hathaway, right? I don't know anybody else who works at Berkshire Hathaway. It's Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett is Berkshire Hathaway. And he's 89, and his vice chairman, Charlie Munger, I think they're friends, they're buddies, he's 95. And when they have their annual conference, they're both fielding questions for 4 to 5 hours. Think about it. This is a skill, you can use it into your 90s. So I'm in my 50s, and I'm just a baby compared to him. I'm just a baby compared to Warren Buffett. So I'm just thinking, if he's doing it at 89, I got still a lot of time to improve. I got a lot of time to get better at this. And I like this quote. He says, one easy way to become worth 50% more than you are now, at least, is to hone your communication skills. It's all about communication, folks. It's all about communication. And we know that Donald Trump got elected because he knew how to get attention. You know, his trademark phrase was, you're fired, and then people in 2016 said, you're hired, and suddenly he's the president because he got the attention. But if that is the new standard, would you bet against this future president of the United States? And her name is Kim Kardashian. And here you see her giving a speech at the White House. And I'm giving a speech here in Middletown Library. So who am I to say that can't happen? So I'm the last person who's going to bet again. She's giving this talk, she's giving a speech, as you can see, at the White House next to the president. And me giving a speech here at the Middletown Library. Nothing against Middletown Library. So who am I to bet against Kim Kardashian becoming the future president of the United States? Because she knows how to get attention. She got attention all the way to be giving a speech at the White House. And she's positioning herself that could lead to her becoming a president. Maybe not in 2020, but watch out. You heard it here first. Okay, so now we got the why. It's about getting attention. You cannot get attention as the technology is getting more and more, we're becoming less and less human. The only way to get attention is to become more human. And there's no better way to become more human than to improve your speaking skills, whether it's one-on-one, one-to-few, one-to-many. Okay, so that's the why. But what makes one an effective speaker? That's what we're going to cover next. And there are essentially 5 things that I want to narrow down. Rather than make it too complicated, so there are 5 things that I'm just going to go. You are the message, audience, it's you, the audience, objective, performance, and practice. So let's go through each one of them. A speech is never going to occur unless you are willing to get up and give that speech. It's not about the content. It's about you. It's about you. At the end, you are the message. Why you? Why me? Why me give this talk? It has to be me, because I want to come here and give this talk. I am the message, but I am the message. If you're not the message, then you can't give the talk. People will see right through you. They won't believe you. We give out message and who we are. People today don't have time to figure things out. If you're the message, then there is no real, there's a message, but at the end, you are the message. You are the message. And if you're not the message, then you're not going to be credible. You have a message, but you are the message. If you can't convey that message, then you cannot be successful. Okay. So the first thing is you. This speech, I am here giving this message, right? I have a message that time is money, communication is wealth. I have to believe it. I have to believe it that only I can deliver this message in my unique way. If I didn't believe that, I can't give the speech. I won't be credible. You'll say, why should I listen to that guy? You won't. It just won't work. So keep that in mind, that all speeches start with you. You are the most important person in any speech. It's not the audience. I know there are talks out there saying it's the audience. No, it's you. Without you, there is no speech. There are talks I see on TED Talk that said, no, audience is the most important. And I'm like, no. Would the speech that Martin Luther King gave, would that have happened without Martin Luther King? No, he was the most important person. The audience came there because of Martin Luther King, because about them, but at the end, it's the speaker. People go to Trump rally not because they go because of Trump. Trump is the message. Trump is the message. People go to Trump rallies or Elizabeth Warren rallies. They are the message. They're the message. They're not going to other candidates' rallies. They don't have rallies. So keep that in mind, that you are the message. And you have to believe it, you're the message. That without you, that unique perspective will not be communicated. Otherwise, you don't add any value. And you won't be credible. Keep that in mind. So that's important. You are the message. The second important thing in the speech is the audience. You do need to know the audience. There are attendees in a talk, and then there are audience. And sometimes the audience may not even be there, as we keep hearing all the time. Audience of one. When somebody goes before a congressional hearing or gets in front of does a press briefing, the audience there is not there. The audience is of one, and that audience member is not there because that person is the president. That's the audience of one. So you need to know who is really the audience. Is the audience of one? Others are attendees. Audience of one? Is it the audience of few, or is it the audience of many? Attendees are attendees. They're just attending. They're not going to do anything. But the audience are the ones you're trying to reach. And who is it? Sometimes you know them, sometimes you don't. In this case, I don't know the audience. I didn't get a chance to know from the library who is going to attend. This is not a very, when you're giving a talk in a library, you don't really know who the audience is. You kind of have a vague idea, but you'll never know because this is opened up for anybody to come. So the audience could be anybody. Audience, we don't know. There are attendees, but I don't know who the audience is. There are attendees, I don't have a good pulse. I can kind of sense it, but I don't really know who the audience is. The better you know the audience, the better you're going to resonate. And we'll talk about the word resonate next. Resonate. That is an important word. You've got to know the audience. So if you're just an attendee, the only thing I can hope for is just pay attention. And maybe there's something here that you'll get out of. Okay? Audience members are just much more are attentive. Audience will just soak it up. Like, wow, this is talking to me. Attendees, I'm talking, but audience, they're feeling like he's talking to me. There's a difference. If you're an attendee, it's like, oh, he's giving a speech, but he's not talking to me. Okay, so if that's happening, then you're an attendee. But if you're an audience, like he's talking to me, this is something resonating, then you're my audience. Okay. The objective. So now you know that you're the message, and you know how to determine who the audience is. Is it one? Is it few? Is it many? That's what you want to know. The better you know it, the better you're going to resonate. But your objective at the end is know, think, feel, do. What does that mean? I want you to know certain things about this topic. And I'm trying to get you to think in a way that changes the way you're thinking. Think differently about this topic. Because let's face it, public speaking is not something I invented. Even though I think I did, but I didn't invent. It's been around since Plato and Aristotle. It's been around since Plato and Aristotle. They wrote about it a long time ago. Aristotle, I think, wrote about one of the first person who wrote everything we need to know about public speaking, about speaking. Aristotle wrote everything we know about public speaking. And that was way before my time. And that was way before my time. Okay, that was way before. I'm old, but that was way before my time. That was way before my time. So this stuff isn't new. But I have to when you're talking, you have to make people think something in a different way. That's what you do. But then I have to make you feel it. If you're not feeling it, it's like if you don't feel it, you don't get it. So it's thinking, it's knowing, it's thinking and feeling. And if you're knowing about it, like I know it, I'm thinking differently. I get it. If you say I get it, then you're knowing and thinking, feeling the way I want you to think and feel. At that point, you can say things like, I get it. That makes sense. Okay? And then the last part is the do part. So in any speech, it's knowing, make your audience know something, make them think differently, make them feel it, and then make them do something. That's your objective. And if you do that, that's all you can do. That's all you can do. The know, think, feel is in this talk. Do comes at the end. Here's what I want you to do. And we'll talk about that later on in one of the slides. The fourth thing is the performance. Public speaking is a performance game. It's a performance art. If you're not performing, it's very hard to persuade people. And I always like to think is that performance is truth. Our president is not a great speaker, but he's definitely a great performer. Our current president is not a great speaker, but he's definitely a great performer. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. He's a great performer. He's basically come from the entertainment side. He knows how to perform. That's what he's all about, performing. And he knows that if you perform, it's the truth. It's the so-called truth. Because people have no time to decide what's the truth. Performance is the truth. And if you're performing, then that to them is good enough. Yes. And why? Because that's how entertainment works. If somebody is a policeman on TV or a doctor on TV, we automatically associate that person as being a doctor. If you see somebody on TV playing a role, we automatically think that that's what that person is. That performance is the truth, so-called truth. It's reality. And the president knows that. So when you're speaking, you have to perform. Because if you're not performing, people think you're phony. So give you a case in point that we also recently, Robert Mueller testified, and he did not perform. And because he did not perform, that had no impact. If he had performed, he could have really, really done some damage. But he did not want to perform. He said, my report stands on its own, stands for itself. Guess what? Report doesn't perform. People perform. And since he didn't perform, didn't move the needle. Nothing happened. Did not move the needle when it came to impeachment. Did not move the needle. The last thing is practice. We hear that all the time. But people don't realize how much practice is required when you get in front of people and give a talk that works. I read, there was a famous football player that you may have heard of. His name was Jerry Rice. And there was a book out that looked at how much he practiced. Jerry Rice was one of the greatest football players ever played, maybe the greatest of all time. According to this author, I think his name was Jeffrey Cohen, he calculated that he practiced 99% of the time, and only 1% of the time he actually played in the game. So that means that if this talk is 1 hour, I would have to practice 99 hours for this 1 hour to be good. That is work. That is how much work is required. That's how much work is required. That's to make this a great speech. Unfortunately, I have a life. Unfortunately, for this one, I can't come close to 99. I've come at least half that. I could say definitely more than 50. I would say definitely half that, but not 99. So 99 is, it's the 99 slash per, it's the 99-1 rule. That 99% of it is going to be practice, and only 1% is actual performance, is actual speaking that you're going to be doing in front of. And that's what it takes to be a really effective speaker. The message is you. The audience, you got to know them. Got to know the audience. Who are they? How to resonate? What's your objective? Get them to know, get them to think, get them to feel, and get them to do. But then you got to perform all of that. And then you got to practice it so that when you get in front of people, it almost seems like you've done it before. You've done it before. It looks like you've done it before. Because otherwise, people out there, it's like when you go see a Broadway play, the people that are performing are not doing it for the first time. All they do is rehearse. That's all they do. They're constantly rehearsing. They're rehearsing that same thing over and over and over again. How much practice do you think they've done in order to be on Broadway? A lot. So think about that. And when you get in front of people, if you want to become an effective speaker, that's why nobody does this. Very few people do this. People don't like to do this. It's like, I just rather wing it. How tough can that be? And then it doesn't come across well. They're not resonating. And it's leaving the audience completely confused. All right. So now we got the what. Now we're going to get to the how. So now we're going to get to some of the practices. So we got the why done. We got the what done. Now it's the how. This is where the rubber meets the road. So before I do it, there are three things about speech that becomes obvious. It's the visual, the vocal, and the words. And this is something that confuses people, because when you are speaking, it's all three working together. But the way it's processed, according to this professor named Morabian, visual is like 57%. I don't know. I'm not sure how these numbers he came up with, but he said that's 50. You must have done some research. It's 57% is visual. The way somebody looks, the body language, the gestures, all of that is the visual. That's 57%. Vocal, how I var- vary my vary my how I use my vocal, loud, small, loud, soft, fast, slow, all of that. That is 35%, and the words are 7%. So what does that mean? What does that really mean? So I'm going to explain to you using an analogy of sports car. When you see a sports car in a showroom, it's all visual. You don't you don't hear the engine. There's nothing. The car is not moving. There's no engine sound. But then let's say you take it outside. The dealer, the salesperson takes you outside and says, "Here's the sports car. Let me just rev up the engine." And suddenly, it's not only visual, but it's now you're hearing the engine. But the car isn't moving, right? For a car to move, it needs gas. The car can go, but it can't go very far. For you to test drive it, it needs gas. It can sound, engine can sound, but if it doesn't have enough gas, you can't take it for a ride, right? So what happened now is that when the car is moving, it's visual because of the way the car looks, the shape of the car, the body, the shape, the color. But the engine also captures your attention. And it wouldn't be moving without the gas. Words are your gas. Vocal is the engine. And visual is the body. Okay? So when you're speaking, your speech comes to a halt if there are no words. Words keep the speech moving. It's what you do with the words is vocal. And how you perform that is visual. But they all are integrated. And that's what makes speaking so difficult. That's what makes speaking so difficult, that you have to integrate all three. Case in point, one of the best way to explain this is, if you remember in the 80s, there used to be that appliance store called Crazy Eddie, and the guy who used to do the commercial, he wasn't Crazy Eddie, he was the actor. His name was Jerry Carroll. And he would come on and say, our prices, like he would be like, our prices are low, our lowest prices, and he would be waving a hand like he was crazy, and he would sound crazy, and then he would end it, Crazy Eddie, our prices are insane, something like that. He had to elongate that A. And when you watch it, there was a consistency there. He was not only looking crazy, he's sounding crazy, and he's saying things that are crazy. And at the end, you kind of think like, wow, I better check this store out. They must have a crazy prices. And they were doing really well. Of course, when you went there, you found out that they were really trying to sell insurance. They were trying to sell insurance on their product. That's how they made their money. And they were running a fraudulent business that eventually went out of business. They eventually went out of business because they were committing fraud. But you found out that their prices weren't that insane. And the main thing they were really selling, their salespeople were incented to sell, is insurance. Insurance on the products that you bought. You bought a service contract. You have to buy insurance on it. That's how they made their money. Buy a cassette recorder. Oh, you should buy insurance on it. And next thing you know is like that's no longer that cheap anymore. They made their money basically selling insurance. I talked to one guy who used to work there. He said, that's how we made our money. Okay, but there was a consistency, and it worked. There was a real consistency. So how do you make your speech interesting? This is the thing. Like I said, I'm going to violate some rules, but less is more. Right? Since I'm kind of teaching here, so I'm going to violate some rules. If I was just giving a talk and I knew my audience, I would not give this kind of speech. So less is more given. The best way to make it less is more is talk about your experience. And the person who did this really well is Steve Jobs when he gave his famous commencement address at Stanford. He talks about three topics about connecting the dots, love and loss, and death. And for each three, he just talks about his personal experience. And because of that, people consider that simple speech, and then he had call to action. Stay hungry, stay foolish, right? That was his talk. That's considered one of the classic commencement address or speech of all time. But it's a very simple speech. He had three areas, three topics, three things he wanted to talk about, and then he gave his own personal story. So talk about your experience because nobody can challenge your experience. You own your experience. Make it interesting. Make it interesting. So I'll give you an example of how I used this recently. I was talking about packaging, and it had to do with career, how important it is to package. And I'm like, okay, what is my personal experience that I can come up with that has to do with packaging? And then it occurred to me, just something that happened this spring. When my wife asked me to get some tomatoes for something she was cooking, and I just hated to go because, I had just gone to ShopRite just previously, and she said, I forgot to tell you, you need to go back and get tomatoes. And I just like, wanted to watch basketball, but I didn't anyway. Went to ShopRite, the produce section, and immediately saw this nicely saran wrapped package for tomatoes. I picked it up. But just before I was about to leave, I said, let me just take a quick peek at the price, which I'd never done before. So this was like something I'd never done before. I always just would have picked it, but that day something happened. I said, let me take a look at the price. And it was $3.49. Next to it, there were tomatoes stock, but they were not packaged. I had to take them, but they look red. They look like tomatoes. I didn't taste them, but they look tomatoes. They look like tomatoes. They certainly were on the stalk, so I'm assuming they were tomatoes. They were freshly picked tomatoes. I said, this one or this one? So I said, let's see. I'll take this one. $1.49 a pound, $3.49. So I got a plastic bag, packed it, went home. Wife didn't even notice it. She liked it. She was so happy I got tomatoes. And then it occurred to me how important packaging is. That packaging just doesn't allow us to think. We don't have to think when something is well packaged. So I was making that point, but there I used my personal experience. And when you use your personal experience, it makes your speech that much stronger. It resonates because that's your experience. As long as you can tell it in a compelling way, it works. Okay, I'm not going to go into the next one, but then the second one is you talk about experience of people you know. People you know. So here an example would be my son was working this summer, was his first job, and he got fired. He got fired in his first job. And he was like really sad. Like, Dad, I got fired on my last day. I said, how do you get fired on your last day of job working at a swim and tennis club? He said, I had a band event and I didn't notify them in advance. And this was the second time I had done it. The boss just said, don't show up. And I was like, I said, oh. I said, that's great. And he was like, well, why are you saying that? I said, you learned a very valuable lesson that no matter what job you have to be responsible. You have to be dedicated. And you learned that on your first job. Just think about it. Even though I know it hurts you, but you'll get over it. The next job, you will never do this again. And I think he got it. I think he was like, but, I can't get a reference now. I said, what can you do? You can't have everything. You learned a very valuable lesson. Okay. And I told him, I said, no matter what, do a good job because you can get a reference. And he gets fired the last day of his job. I'm like, ugh. There goes college. You can't get a reference from this. You can't get a reference from your boss now. It would have looked good. But I said, but look on the bright side. You're probably never going to make this mistake again. Otherwise, you're not going to be working again, ever. Because you cannot screw up like that. And he's like, oh, yeah, okay, I will never let that happen. So I was now we'll see, okay? The last thing is you can make your speech very interesting talking about something that's in the news, something that's you read in a book, something like a novel or something. Movies are always great. Anything that's like movies, some popular movies, like whether it's Jerry Maguire or you name it. Movies are excellent whenever you like. Any movies that you saw, it's current or anything that people, Godfather, Jerry Maguire, some of these movies that have like a lot of things to teach that people have seen, very popular movies, are excellent. So always find something like Godfather is always great. There's always something you can pick up from Godfather movie that you can use when it comes to business. Okay. The second thing is humor. Now, this is something I just wanted to kind of, because people think that when they're getting in front of people, they have to be somehow humorous. And I think that's kind of, you want to be not humorous because the audience, again, you don't know the audience. If the audience knows you well, even then it's kind of dangerous because humor is hard. Here's a reason why. When you came to this talk, you didn't come to listen to a stand-up comic routine. You didn't come to see a comedian. You came to see a speaker. That means that you are geared to listen to a speaker. If this was positioned as a comedy act, then you would come here being entertained. And that's the difference. When you're a speaker, be a speaker. When you're a comedian, be a comedian. Don't go into a speech. Comedians cannot go and give a speech. And speakers cannot go into comedy. That's not your job. Pick one. If you want to be a comedian, be a comedian. If you want to be a speaker, be a speaker. Don't try to mix the two because it confuses the audience. And the second thing is that you may have a very important point. Like in this point, I'm saying that time is money and communication as well. If I suddenly start getting into comedy too much, like some of these are not comedy, it's just something that's observational. But if I suddenly start getting into a comedy routine, I'm going to trample on my message. And that means the speech essentially did not work. The speech did not work. Because you're not going to remember the speech. You're going to remember something that was not the main thing to remember. Something that I might have said that's funny. So you got to use your judgment here when you start using humor. Humor is very tricky. So let me just tell you some of the practices that I do, that I think, and again, I am at this point basically constantly working on this skill. This is not an easy skill. This is a skill that we have to constantly work on in order to improve. Number one thing, there are two things right here. I carry an audio recorder and I carry it on my cell phone, smartphone. You can always record your voice anywhere, whether you're driving, walking, it's in my pocket. I am constantly recording my thoughts. I'm constantly rehearsing the way I talk, and that's what I do. I think everybody should be doing that. If you want to become good, like I said, I'm trying to grow. This is a growth. This is a speech. The thing about speaking is that every time you speak, you're kind of starting from scratch because the audience is different. Every audience is going to be different. So you can't ever say that because I spoke in front of this group, it will work with this group. It doesn't. That's what's so good about speaking. Every audience is different. One speaker will be resonate and the other speaker will not with the different audience. So if you take Donald Trump and put in front of Elizabeth Warren's audience, he will not resonate. If you take Elizabeth Warren and put in front of Donald Trump's audience, she will not resonate. Right there. Is she a bad speaker? No. Is he a bad performer? No. It's just not right for them. So think about that. You have to know your audience, and that's what determines whether you're a good speaker. It's the audience that determines that. Second is conversation. Speaking is like a conversation. The way I'm talking to you right now would be the same if I was walking with you. Of course, I would be speaking a little softly, maybe not. According to my wife, I don't speak softly, so maybe she would disagree. But if I was walking with you, I would be speaking the same way. So here's what I want you to do. Find people that you can have a conversation with. Now, conversation is a little tricky. We tend to And I kind of lump this into three types of conversation we have most of the time. It's small talk, mid talk, I call it, and big talk. Small talk is kind of contextual. Like you meet somebody here and say, hey, this is the first time I've been to this place, but I didn't realize that, I've been to other libraries. I've never seen uh, like a, a room this big that can accommodate close to 200 to 300 people easily. That's contextual. And the person, if he's a conversation extender, said, yeah, yeah, I've been to other libraries. I've never seen it. You got yourself a small talk conversation going. That's great. You just got ball rolling here. And then if the person seems like it's somebody that, you can talk to, somebody looks like he's not gonna I just want to get away from you, you can say, so, what do you think of the Yankees? So, what do you think of the Yankees? Man, I can't believe I'm missing the Yankees game tonight. Yeah. So now you brought it from contextual to mid-talk, which is about some event that's taking place, about some sports or something. That's mid-talk. Yeah, they're gonna be tough in the playoffs. I think that if Judge and these guys come through, even with all the injuries, it's amazing how well they've done this year. Suddenly you got yourself a topic about Yankees. And then you find out how much more you can push it. The ultimate push is the big talk, where you're saying about something that you saw. I saw the movie, you know, some movie about sports, or some book you read about baseball, right? Analytics, it's interesting. So here's how it can work. Small talk was just about being here. The mid talk went into talking about the Yankees. The big talk kind of segue. You can't suddenly say, well, let me tell you about Higgs boson. I think that would be a stretch. That would be a stretch. You can say, it's interesting how baseball has evolved with analytics. Have you been paying attention to that? I just read a book on it, and it's just amazing that everything these players do, these managers are now using so much technology to make decisions. I don't know. I wish we went back to the old days where the manager just would kind of use his gut to make decisions. You just went into big talk. The guy's like, yeah, I like to just, what happened to yogiism or something like that. So you went from small talk to big talk to big talk. That's the conversation you need to learn how to do. If you can do that, you can get in front of people and give a talk. And you can practice this with one-on-one. I practice this with any people that I meet. I don't, if they don't like it, they'll tell you, oh, I'm sorry about it, oh, I gotta go. Okay, I'll talk to you later, right? But be interesting, because otherwise how are you gonna know you're interesting? Start conversing. Anything I'm gonna use in a speech, I would like to have conversed one-on-one with somebody. If they're boring, they don't want to listen to you, fine. Find somebody else. There are a lot of people around. But don't just like grab people from the street. Hey, do you know what analytics? Not like that, right? Just kind of, there's like a cadence to it, right? There's a cadence to how you converse. There's a cadence to conversation. And the better you become, you will figure this out. I'm sure most of you do this well. I'm sure this is nothing new. But this is how you can go. Like somebody said, I can't get in front of public speaking. You can't get in front of public speaking is you're not getting in front of speaking. You can't speak in front of few or many if you can't speak well in front of one. Keep that in mind. Analyze other people's talks on YouTube to improve. This goes without saying. And the last thing is, speaking is a risk-taking. You've got to take some risks. Can't play it safe. When you play it safe, you're not taking any chances. Speaking is all about taking chances. You got to take some chances when you're speaking. It's a courageous act. As I always say, speaking is about courage. It's about clarity. It's about connection. It's about being crisp. And it's about being creative. That's what speaking is all about. Okay, so many of you are wondering, okay, how do I get to that? How do I go? So there's this thing, this is how path to success works, right? You start with knowing, then you start doing, then you start learning, then you start improving, then you start competing, and then you start winning. Okay, this talk is on this first thing. There is a gap that always exists. When I came in, I know what I was going to talk about. I know what I want you to know. I know what I want to think. I know how I think about this topic, and I know how I feel about this topic. That's me. Remember, you are the message. That's me. But there's a gap that exists between me and you. And if I can get that closer, if we can get closer, if I can get it closer to you, where you're saying I'm starting here and he's here, if I can get you to come up, that's when you start resonating. So that's the knowing, right? The knowing, think, feel gap that exists. And if I can close that gap, then that's called resonating. You're getting it. You got it. But that's not enough. Then there's the action gap that exists. Are you going to do anything about it? I practice this, right? I mean, as you can see, I'm here. I had to practice this. So there's the action that I had to work on. You may be here. Are you going to come? How much are you going to come to reduce that action gap? And then comes the achievement gap. So once you got to break that action gap, then you got to increase your achievement gap. So as your action starts increasing, you're going to start achieving. Something's going to go well. People are going to start thinking, hey, this guy knows a lot. You're going to know when you're achieving. Achieving doesn't mean that suddenly you're going to get awards and dates and all kinds of stuff. That will happen, but I'm not talking about that. People are going to view you differently. Believe me, it does happen. They're going to think you're smart, and some people, believe it or not, are going to say you're too smart. So there's the thing. There's smart, and then some people are going to say you're too smart for me. You're thinking too much. And then good things start happening. You'll be able to go and get a good job. You'll be able to get in front of people and speak. You will develop wealth. Communication is wealth. So let's work on this next one. So if this talk resonated and you want to move to the next thing, the best thing to do is take this 30-day challenge. And 30 days, like roughly, but I would say try to do it 30 days, because if you take this seriously, and if you do this for 30 days, just do 3-minute video, boom, on any topic that you feel strongly about. And there are a lot of topics, right? There are a lot of topics. Every day there's something going on. Sports, movies, current events, you name it. Climate change, anything. Keep it not too political and not too religious, but keep it to the point where you have a point of view. And whatever you want. It's your talk. Any topic. If you think that you want to make it public, put it on YouTube. Make it public. You'll be surprised. Nobody watches YouTube. Nobody will watch anything you put on YouTube. There's so much things on YouTube. So don't think like, just because on YouTube, suddenly the whole world is going to be sending you spam. They're all going to be trolling you. Nothing happens. I put so much stuff on YouTube, nobody even responds. I'm like, where are all these people that give you a hard time? Where are they? How come I never hear from them? I've been putting things on YouTube and all that. Nobody comes after me. Nobody. And even if they do, I'm like, troll me. Still, nobody does it. It just doesn't happen to me. I don't know. Okay, so, but don't try to make it too perfect. Do 3 takes and then record it. The whole point is do it for 30 days. Here's what will happen. 1/3 of these are going to be good, 1/3 okay, and 1/3 are not going to be good. That's how it's going to work. So here's the letter you can write to Sheila. Okay, Sheila is the one that I work with to organize this event. And I'll just read it to you. So the first sentence to thanking her, but it's the second one I want to read. So you can say, so I'm only giving you, okay? Because I'm only going to draft the letter for you so that you can come and give a talk. And if you are going to give a talk, send me an email. I'll come and listen to you. I'll come and see it. I was motivated by the talk such that I'm interested in giving a talk at the library. Would you be open to look at a proposal of a talk I have in mind that I believe will serve the community? She will say, yeah, send it over. And that's how you get started. And then you can invite, if you want to raise the stakes, you can invite Michael. It's not cheap, but hey, if you want to raise the stakes, you can have Michael come and videotape it. He's not cheap, but you can just, he's not cheap, but you can raise the stakes and he will videotape it. And then you can put it on YouTube. You're on your way. That's it. I just told you everything I'm doing. I've told you everything I'm doing. And then you can promote it on LinkedIn. You can promote it on Twitter. I don't use Instagram, but you can promote it on Instagram. You can promote it on Facebook, on your website. That's it. And then you can just take that, chop it up into different pieces, promote that. Boom. You're on your way. This is not that difficult. This is not that difficult. So at this point, I want to conclude this talk by first thanking you, but now I want to tell you something interesting. Something interesting. Communication is one skill that we all control. As I said from the beginning, you do not need to go to Ivy League school. You do not need to go get a certificate. This is a doing skill, and it is the only skill that I believe is going to separate us in life, when it comes to relationship, and when it comes to getting ahead. This is the must-have skill. You can be smart, but if you can't communicate smartly, it's not going to matter. You can use data. You can make decisions. But if you can't communicate, it's not going to be worth anything. You can use data. Small, big, small, medium, big, small, medium, big data. You can make critical decisions. But if you cannot communicate, nothing is going to happen. Simple as that. It's all about communication. And one of the things that you always hear people say is that somebody's not a good listener. I get this thing, you're a good listener. And I used to think that maybe I'm not a good listener. Now, I have 2 ears. Unfortunately, I can't get another ear, okay? None of us can get another ear. So we're stuck with 2 ears. But still people keep telling us, you got 2 ears, use it. And I used to think that maybe I'm not a good listener. But then I realized the burden is not on the listener. The burden is on the talker. Are you a good talker? That's what I want you to think about. Become a good talker. Don't count on somebody being a good listener. Because when you're counting on somebody being a good listener, you're losing them. You're losing them. You lost them. Become a good talker so that they will listen. And not only you guys are good listener, but you guys are marathon listeners. That's very special. So I want to thank you for not only being a good listener, but being a good marathon listener. Think about it. They say a person's attention is only 8 seconds. And now, I don't know, this talk is more than an hour. That's like 500 times more than that. So think about how great listener you guys are. So this talk was about me talking, right? I must have done something right. Or maybe you glued to that seat, unless somebody put glue on that seat. But you remained here for 1 hour, and I think you were paying attention. So not only you're great listeners, but you're great marathon listeners. And that's amazing. So I want to thank you for being such a great listener and coming to this talk. And now I'll open it up. So thank you for coming, and now I'll open it up for any question, Q&A. Let's just do Q&A now.